Okay, let's get into this. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are really plumbing the depths of commitment and, I guess, collapse.
Mm.
We're looking at that explosive, really unpredictable point where a chosen partnership just smashes into this impulsive, overwhelming passion.
It's a deep dive into what you could almost call the physics of betrayal. We've got these incredibly intimate sources detailing the lives of four characters, Kate, Luke, Carrie, and Cressida.
Right.
And they're all linked by vows, by friendship, and then ultimately by infidelity. The material we have, it tracks the entire emotional arc.
So we get the whole story.
The whole thing. We get the internal monologues, the rationalizations, the deep emotional costs for everyone involved, right from that first stolen kiss to the messy long-term fallout, both geographical and psychological.
So our mission today is to move beyond that simple narrative of just an affair. We really want to unpack the different definitions of love these characters were living by. We're going to contrast what Kate called this mad love, with the more reasoned, dependable, and let's be honest, sometimes mundane companionship she chose at first. We need to figure out which one of these forces actually holds up when things start to crumble.
And the entire framework for this really rests on a single quote from Kate that just it beautifully and kind of terrifyingly lays out the two kinds of connection.
What was that again?
She defines her love for her husband, Carrie, as a decision, something built with effort and with rationale. But her affair with Luke, that, she said, was an impulse as difficult to resist as gravity.
That analogy is so powerful. It immediately it removes personal responsibility, doesn't it? It elevates what she did to this cosmic, almost inevitable event.
Exactly. And she follows it up with this crucial distinction. She says, trip over love, you can get up. Fall in love and you fall forever.
Wow.
For Kate, this was a complete surrender. She talks about the beginning of it as just enjoying the swoop and the speed.
Right, that feeling of free fall.
Yeah, the unnerving sensation of having your feet higher than your head and believing the fall itself. Well, that was the destination.
But gravity, as we all know, is always followed by an impact. And the sources we have, they detail just how far that emotional shrapnel traveled from that initial explosion. It touched marriages, careers, friendships.
It forced people into geographical exile.
Yeah, so we're tracking that plummet and the messy, messy settlement that comes after.
So let's start at the beginning. Let's look at the foundations of these two very different marriages that were, side by side until that moment of impact. We'll start with the glossy, seemingly perfect couple, Luke and Cressida.
The golden boy and the virgin bride.
Exactly.
He's the quintessential golden boy, a total showman, someone whose life always just seemed to have this effortless spotlight on it. Valedictorian, head prefect. And his birth was almost mythical. He was the boy his parents had longed for after having 3 daughters. The sources describe him physically as having hair the color of a halo in a Renaissance painting.
And eyes the blue of the Madonna's robe. He's just radiated this idea of perfection.
But that aura, that golden perfection, it creates its own kind of pressure, doesn't it? And he maintained that facade in his job. He worked in advertising.
Which is, let's face it, the business of manufacturing desirability.
Right.
Luke himself even says his job is getting paid for making things up. So his whole career is built on illusion, which is just a perfect parallel for his seemingly perfect marriage.
And Cressida, on the outside, she matched that perfection. She's a beautiful, incredibly ambitious pediatric oncologist.
As her career is the absolute opposite of his. It's about life and death, the messy, irreversible realities that Luke's advertising world tries to, Photoshop out.
Yeah, but the sources reveal this fascinating detail about her past, which kind of underscores that virgin bride pressure.
Right. She was described as relatively unsullied before marriage. But she actually threw away her intact status less than 48 hours before the wedding with Luke.
Wait, really? Less than 2 days?
Less than 2 days. That frantic last-minute act, it just suggests this enormous pressure to fulfill some kind of societal or maybe personal expectation of what a wife should be.
Right.
Doesn't sound like it came from genuine desire.
That detail is a huge crack in their golden facade right from the start. And Luke even admits the wedding night sex was, quote, an anticlimax.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a physical disappointment. It was this realization for him that the ceremony hadn't fundamentally changed him or them.
And what's even more revealing is what he was thinking about before the wedding.
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't excited about being a husband. He was worried about an accidental pregnancy because he hadn't used contraception.
He was already focused on the consequences.
Yeah.
The potential mess. not the joy of the commitment itself.
And their whole suburban life together just reflects that tension between, what was expected on the outside and what he was feeling on the inside. He hated the suburbs.
Deeply resisted it, hated the constant lawn mowing and gutter cleaning. He despised that whole commitment to maintenance and predictability.
So why did he move?
He only moved because Cresta's sister chose the house for them. A 4-bedroom, future-proof home, insisting they needed the rooms for kids, and soon.
So he felt pressured into this compromise.
Totally. This gilded cage of family planning and societal norms. Their relationship wasn't really sustained by a mutual desire for that life, but by the necessity of performing it for everyone else.
Okay, so now let's pivot sharply over to Kate and Carrie. They represent the slow burn and the steady hand. They're the complete counterpoint to Luke and Cressida's glittering speed.
Yeah, a total contrast. Kate's an anthropologist. She works with relics and artifacts.
So her whole job is literally about understanding permanence, what survives the ravages of time and emotion, which gives her a really interesting, almost detached perspective on her own life later on.
For sure. And she met Carrie under the most chaotic circumstances you can imagine.
Right, the Melbourne Cup. It was pouring rain. Her heel broke.
And Carrie, without even saying a word, just scoops her up over his shoulder and carries her through the rain to an old feed shed.
It's this dramatic knight in shining armor moment, but it's rooted in physical support and practicality, not romantic fluff.
And that really set the tone for their relationship. Kate admits it took her almost a year to actually fall in love with him.
And Carrie, the shy geneticist, he was actually interested in Cressida at first, wasn't he?
He was, which is a wonderful little wrinkle in the story. He'd admired her amazing hair from across the hospital corridors, but he pretty quickly shifted his focus to Kate, maybe recognizing a better fit for his own need for, a stable partnership.
So what Kate grew to love about Carrie were these small, consistent, profoundly reliable things.
The little virtues.
Yeah. He ran her baths, which is such a quiet act of service. He'd apologize immediately after they fought. He was all about repair, not about winning.
And he read books she adored, even though he preferred his science journals. And he'd buy popcorn at the movies that he wouldn't even eat himself.
These are commitments that are expressed through these almost mundane acts of care. They don't have that spectacular rush of gravity, but they have the consistency of a glacier, as Kate herself says later. He wasn't a showman, he was a stabilizer.
Right.
But this steady-state relationship, it hits its first really unexpected challenge in a deeply intimate way. The sexual scorecard conflict.
Oh, yeah.
Kate reveals she's had 18 sexual partners before him, and Carrie has had 5.
And Carrie, the man who cherishes predictability and order, he reacts with visible shock, almost recoil. For him, 18 isn't just a number. It represents a level of emotional and physical chaos that he finds deeply disturbing.
He calls it unseemly, and then equates it to a bloody football team.
Which is such a perfect, if awkward, metaphor for a guy whose life is ruled by lab protocols. He's genuinely distressed. He says it's not even a third of your total. He sees it as proof of her volatility, her impulsiveness.
But Kate's analysis of Carrie's low number is where the real insight is. She completely flips the script.
She does. She sees his 5 partners not as a lack of experience, but as evidence of his meticulous integrity and restraint.
She figures that, knowing Carrie, he would have taken great care with each of them. Found out their full names, made sure they got home safely, probably called the next day.
Yeah, so for him, 5 partners was just right. It represented intentionality.
Whereas her 18, she admits, included times where sex was silly or dangerous or because I was drunk, or worse, she says, out of politeness.
And that's where the tension really is. You have Kate, the spontaneous explorer with a messy, unpredictable past, versus Carrie, the geneticist who wants to control the variables and ensure stable, measurable outcomes.
So even before Luke ever enters the picture, Kate and Carrie are already struggling with this foundational clash, the value of impulsive experience versus the value of calculated integrity.
Exactly. The stage is perfectly set for an outside force, the golden chaos that is Luke, to come in and exploit that pre-existing structural weakness.
And that weakness gets exploited at Sarah's wedding, which is a setting just dripping with irony. A celebration of dependable vows that becomes the exact place where those vows start to unravel.
That's the perfect way to put it. While they're sitting in the crowded church, Kate has this really powerful, intimate moment with Carrie that, ironically, highlights the safety and depth of their bond right before she breaks it.
Tell us about that touch.
Carrie's fingers move lightly but purposefully over her hand during the ceremony. It's not sexual, it's a gesture of hypnotic comfort and ownership.
Okay.
And Kate feels this literal physical a three-ring circus in her lap. It was the absolute peak of their pure, intimate connection. A moment where Carrie's steady presence worked perfectly and she responded.
It's like the last time that simple gesture works, a final blessing before the fall.
Totally. And then, at the reception, the gravitational pull starts. Luke is immediately noticeable. He's aboard an Anne. Cressida is talking medicine, probably about complex clinical trials, a world his advertising fluff can't even touch.
And he's drawn to Kate's energy.
He is. The sources point out that she wore glitter mascara, and it was intentional. Kate says, "We don't go to many black tie events, so I thought I'd make an effort." She was deliberately trying to attract attention.
And Luke, the guy who lives for presentation, was the perfect target. He saw her daring and vivid glow.
Exactly. And the kiss itself is framed as pure reflex, a surrender to the moment. It happens right as the tango music dies. Perfect dramatic timing.
He tries to explain it away later, right? To Cressida.
Oh, yeah. He says he was drunk and got caught up in the moment. But Carrie, who was watching the whole thing, sees right through it.
What does he see?
Carrie observed that Luke was oozing remorse, but at the same time giving a good impression of enjoying it.
Wow, that contrast is critical.
It is. Luke is already calculating the social cost while he's still basking in the emotional payoff. And Cressida's reaction confirms how intense it was. She thought someone was going to have to throw a bucket of water over them. It was visible, undeniable passion.
So the affair immediately escalates. It goes from that one spectacular public explosion to the secret, almost mundane geographies of their work lives. This is where the mad love starts to build its own secret set of rules.
And the contrast is really compelling. The spaces they choose are either institutional or terrifyingly high risk. They made love in Kate's third-floor office in the museum.
With her ID pass, dodging security patrols.
Making love right under the gaze of a relic, the blue whale skeleton.
And Kate is drawn in by the environment as much as by Luke. She found the building beautiful, and she found Luke's interest in the architecture really appealing.
It's a temporary merging of their worlds, isn't it? Her professional stability is used to facilitate his chaos, and they're surrounded by these objects that just signify how quickly human endeavor and emotion fade away.
But the truly terrifying setting is their first explicit sexual encounter.
The rooftop. After a trivia night, they were right next to the plexiglass wall of a 17-story hospital, and Kate admits she trusted their combined weight to this suicide repellent.
I have to stop you there. That specific detail, trusting their combined weight to suicide repellent 17 stories up, that's a terrifying metaphor for the absolute reckless risk they were taking. Not just emotionally, but physically.
For sure. The danger itself became part of the charge, that swoop and the speed she talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Kate looks back later and notes how the architecture itself seemed complicit. She says, "It gives me chills now to think of how I trusted our combined weight to a single sheet of plexiglass 17 stories up." That lack of concern for self-preservation, it just shows how completely they were immersed in the gravitational pull of the affair.
So how did Luke rationalize this? Maintaining this thrilling, high-risk secret life while also living the golden life with Cressida.
Luke fully embraces what you might call the rationalization of dual love. For 7 months, he felt like he was the happiest man in the world.
Right.
Yeah. He felt exhilarated by Kate. The excitement, the risk, the passion, and then soothed by Cressida. The stability, the home, the public approval. He truly believed he had achieved everything a man could want between the two of them.
Okay, I have to challenge that. He compares it to loving two children equally, doesn't he? Is the source suggesting he genuinely believed that, or was he just desperately trying to use a morally sound argument to justify a profound moral failure?
I think it's definitely self-serving, but I also think he needed to believe it was destiny, not a choice. The source shows he elevated the affair to almost spiritual significance. He said, it was love, and it was sex, and it was fate and karma and reincarnation too. It was an epiphany and an epitaph.
By making it destiny, he removes his own agency, and therefore his own guilt.
Exactly. He believes that guilt fades, fear evaporates, which just underscores the addictive quality of the affair. It wasn't just physical, it was an ego reinforcement mechanism. The source is very clear he needed both. Kate for the lust and excitement, and Cressida for the stability in the home he'd been pressured into.
So the gravity was strong, but the decision to actually leave that stability was just too frightening.
He was trying to elevate the affair to a philosophical necessity to avoid the uncomfortable truth that he was just being
Yeah.
cowardly and greedy. But the chaos he refused to acknowledge, it starts to exert its own gravitational force, demanding action and consequences.
And as the affair continues, the pressure cooker starts to burst. We see Carrie, who's still unaware of the full scope of the betrayal, just growing more and more fearful. His anxiety over that first kiss, it hasn't faded. It's deepened.
And that leads him to a desperate, almost primal strategic move.
Right.
Carrie initially accepted the kiss as just a drunken indiscretion, but the constant distraction and distance from Kate, it terrified him. He felt his stable, predictable world slipping away.
And his strategy is so disturbing because it comes from the usually rational, measured geneticist.
It is. He wants to secure Kate through conception.
He proposes a child, basically believing Kate owed him one to re-cement their vows, or even more chillingly, to tie her to my side with blood. That phrase alone, tying her with blood, it shows how completely his fear has just overridden his civilized nature.
It's a primitive, territorial response to an existential threat.
And this is where Kate's active deception becomes this high-stakes emotional tightrope walk.
She told Carrie months ago that she'd stopped taking the pill, but she was secretly still taking it. And whenever Carrie would confront her about her distance, she would use their apparent inability to conceive as an emotional shield.
He burst into tears.
And claimed she was depressed about her inability to conceive.
That's manipulation of the highest order, weaponizing his greatest hope against him. But the physical reality of that lie, it had a deadline.
It did. The lie comes to a head during a crucial fertility clinic appointment. They're there for standard tests, and when the nurse asks about Kate's cycle, Carrie, the earnest, anxious husband, he jumps in.
Oh, no.
He proudly volunteers that her periods are regular as clockwork, every 28 days.
That detail is just agonizing. He's trying to be helpful and supportive, and he has no idea he's forcing her into an inescapable corner.
Exactly. This forces Kate to keep up the lie, knowing that the blood test scheduled for late June, which would check her hormone levels and ovulation, would immediately reveal she was on contraception. She realizes she has only weeks to invent some catastrophic, believable excuse before her entire deception just collapses.
And while Kate is navigating these high-stakes domestic lies, Cressida, Luke's wife, is channeling her energy into a legitimate high-stakes professional ambition, and she has no idea that her husband is terrified of her success.
Not at all. Cressida is meticulously preparing this competitive application for a prestigious 2-year overseas fellowship in Michigan.
And she sees this as a way to fix their marriage.
She does. Not just a career move. She's hoping the fellowship will give them regular hours, no shifts, no pagers, and grant them quality time away from the pressures of their current life to really focus on Luke.
So she's seeing the problem as structural, something you can solve with a change of scenery, while Luke sees the fellowship as an escape hatch for her.
His panic is palpable. He sees the move not as a solution, but as an alibi for ending their relationship. A cleaner way out that minimizes the chaos he so desperately fears.
And he's terrified of divorce, the process of it.
Selling the house, the emotional fallout, the public explanations. He realizes that the longer the affair goes on, the more dependent he's becoming on Kate. And he can't afford to lose her just as his stable life is about to shift.
And then the situation escalates dramatically. Cressida discovers the affair and immediately moves out. But her anger isn't expressed through melodrama. It's clinical, calculated revenge.
This is a perfect demonstration of her personality. Controlled, precise, and focused on consequences. She doesn't scream or break things. She demands that Luke submit to immediate testing for HIV, gonorrhea, and other STDs.
It's a total humiliation of the golden boy.
And the source detail here is just visceral. It's necessary to understand Luke's feeling of violation. He describes the procedure for the gonorrhea test with horror, a cotton swab being rammed down the eye of your penis.
Wow.
It's a complete physical and emotional stripping away of his golden facade.
But what's so tragic is how Luke interprets this demand.
Yes. He endures the excruciating procedure, secretly hoping that the demand for STD tests signaled that Cressida was considering reconciliation. He actually thinks, surely Cress wouldn't have asked me to submit to such indignities if she weren't considering that we might sleep together again someday.
His desperate hope just blinds him to the severity of her strategic anger, her demand for accountability.
Totally. And his indecision, his paralysis between the two women, it pushes Kate to her breaking point. She's exhausted by the deception and Luke's failure to choose.
So she delivers her ultimatum.
A 3-week ultimatum. And she times it precisely ahead of the fellowship verdict, which was due 4 weeks later.
She wants the decision to be an act of will, not an accident of fate. She demands agency.
She says, "It can't be fate or luck or the fall of the cards. He has to want me as much as I want him." She refuses to let their future be decided by a bunch of total strangers, meaning the fellowship board.
And this forces Luke to choose stability over chaos. Or, maybe more accurately, fear over desire.
And his response comes via email.
Which is just a deeply impersonal choice for such a life-altering decision.
He says he just can't do this because too many people are going to get hurt. This is the core of his personality laid bare, avoiding difficult, messy, emotional confrontations at all costs.
And here's the kicker. The detail that seals his fate with Kate forever. He offers to continue the affair.
He asks Kate to wait a year until Cressida realizes her dream, claiming he owed her that. He was trying to maintain stability with Cressida while keeping Kate as his passionate safety net.
Kate immediately sees this for what it is. Emotional warehousing. Being put on layaway.
Exactly. Kept for a rainy day. She saw right through his attempt to minimize his own discomfort and secure his own future at her expense. So she cuts him off. Instantly. Vows never to contact him again. The gravitational pull is suddenly and permanently severed by the shock of his cowardice.
And the fallout is just catastrophic. It leads to immediate geographical and emotional divergence for all four of them. Let's start with Carrie's discovery and his truly terrifying, controlled reaction.
Right. So Cressida, after Luke's denial, she acts with purpose. She calls Carrie at work and demands confirmation of the affair. She needs the definitive, clinical truth.
And when Carrie confronts Kate, she confesses immediately.
She does. And the source material focuses on his terrifying control. He doesn't shout, he doesn't cry, he doesn't throw anything. He just silently walks out, gets in his car, and quietly drives away.
Kate notes that his control scared me more than any show of anger. It was just this cold, absolute expression of power and devastation.
That control is his signature. It's the geneticist taking absolute control over a volatile variable. He comes back later, unable to speak, and just leaves documents for an extended trip to Europe on her desk. Italy, France, Venice.
So he proposes a reconciliation trip, but it's more of a command than an invitation.
Oh, absolutely. He reminds her, any other man would have thrown you out for what you did, but you're quibbling about leave. For fuck's sake, I'm offering you a second chance.
It's an act of possessive grace, an attempt to forcibly reestablish their structure.
And Kate agrees, but under duress. She sees it as a fantasy reconciliation.
Yeah, and her body just reacts to the emotional shutdown. She takes a sleeping pill as soon as they get on the plane and sleeps through the entire flight. She spends the first month sleepwalking through the trip, just wanting to regroup and lick my wounds. The passion is gone, replaced by this dull, aching exhaustion and an obligation to fulfill Carrie's desperate plan.
And meanwhile, Luke, who chose stability over Kate via email, finds himself immediately without either woman. Cressida changes the locks, forcing him into a friend's spare room. He moves in with his friend Tim, who immediately becomes his moral interrogator. Luke is constantly grilled about the why of the affair. Tim, who is newly engaged and suddenly moral, doesn't let him off the hook at all.
And Luke feels deeply wronged by this. He complains that he earned no credit for his honorable decision to stay.
The irony is just brutal. He sacrificed Kate for Cressida, only to discover, from Tim no less, that Cressida had definitively ended counseling and was proceeding with her move to Michigan without him.
Devastating.
He's devastated. He feels numb. He lost both the passion and the stability he was clinging to. And this loss, it forces him into exile.
So he accepts an offer to relocate to Boston with his advertising agency.
It's a complete, deliberate displacement. It takes him away from the hated suburban compromise, but also away from all his roots and friends in Melbourne. The move is his attempt to physically escape the consequences of his emotional paralysis.
And Cressida's path, the one forged by the betrayal, is arguably the most successful in terms of her own self-realization and independence.
I'd agree with that. She throws herself into her work, yes, but she also finds this profound, unexpected relationship with a man named Paul.
Paul is a consultant, 19 years older, a self-described matrimonial refugee.
Right. And Cressida finds this unique foundational connection with him that's based on shared emotional depth, something that was completely absent with Luke.
What's the defining moment of their connection?
It happens at the hospice.
Yeah.
Cressida observes Paul's tender care for his own dying father, shaving him, bathing his atrophying limbs. This is the messy, irreducible reality of care.
Something Luke couldn't handle.
Exactly. Cressida notes that Luke would consider this kind of care obscene because it was completely devoid of any shine or glory.
So that detail really speaks volumes about Cressida's evolution. She moves from valuing Luke's superficial golden boy shine to valuing Paul's quiet, applied tenderness and his willingness to engage with the ugliness of life.
She finds profound freedom in this new, grounded relationship. She realizes that commitments can be undone, and it's better just to live from day to day instead of agonizing over the future or performing for others. She stops watching the clock, stops worrying if she cared too much about her patients. She finds a true, steady passion in her independence and her ambition, entirely separate from Luke's chaos.
So we circle back to Carrie and Kate and their reluctant trip to Europe, which starts to define their permanent new ground. Their refound stability is cemented by an unexpected biological intervention in Venice.
That's right. Kate discovers she's pregnant in Europe. Her birth control prescription had run out while she was distracted by all the emotional turmoil, and she finally sleeps with Carrie in Venice, thinking the risk of conception was minimal after so many months. But biology intervened, or, as Carrie might say, the variables finally aligned.
And Kate is initially unenthusiastic about it.
Not at all. She sees the pregnancy as too soon. She confesses she worries she lacks a maternal streak, but she accepts it as the definitive closing of all other options.
A clear signal that her passionate, chaotic life with Luke was over, replaced by the inevitable path of family.
But for Carrie, the news is a complete victory. It's the successful outcome of his desperate, primal strategy. The sources say he was understandably thrilled, crying with joy and sleeping every night with his hand on her stomach. The child becomes the living embodiment of his claim on her.
And the moment of reconciliation and acceptance is captured so beautifully in the source material with a very Australian analogy. Their sexual relationship restarted in Venice, and Carrie describes it as good and satisfying and familiar, like eating Vegemite toast again after weeks of rich foreign food and complicated sauces.
That analogy is perfect. It's not about spectacular pleasure. It's about reliable, comforting, uniquely familiar success. It's a triumph of predictability over complexity. The affair with Luke was the rich foreign food. Carrie is the safe, known comfort of home.
But the shadow of the affair can't be entirely erased. And the final, painful convergence of these broken relationships happens at Tim's wedding, the very friend whose wedding started the whole thing.
The irony is just.
Yeah.
Kate is visibly subdued. She's pregnant, wearing a terrible blue dress, something completely unlike the glittering, vibrant, attention-seeking Kate that Luke had fallen for. She's already settling into the muted reality of permanent commitment.
And Luke, who's flown in from Boston, he's watching her.
He is. He notices her quiet desperation. She was flashing in opal eyes, flashing a distress signal every time she looked his way. She was hunting for recognition, and all she got was a brief, detached jolt of acknowledgement from Luke.
Despite her distress, Luke stays detached. He's suffering from his own psychological and geographical exile in Boston, dealing with the consequences of his failure to choose.
Right. And Carrie, on the other hand, feels profound triumph. He's secured his prize. Kate is mine inside and out. The circle of their marriage is closed by the birth of their son, Joel.
But here's the final painful irony. The involuntary artifact of the affair rooted in her otherwise settled life.
Joel's hair reminds Kate of Luke's distinctive golden coloring.
A permanent, daily, undeniable reminder of the love that almost destroyed her marriage, now residing in the child who saved it.
It's just, yeah.
So let's finish by tracking Luke's path in exile. He relocated to Boston, and he notes the city's ugliness. The black-brown snow, dog droppings, used condoms in the Charles River. He actively chose that grime over the gilded perfection of the suburbs he hated.
That choice is deeply symbolic, isn't it? He chooses the tangible, unforgiving reality of a gritty city over the illusion of the perfect life he maintained in Melbourne. His professional life is easy, that's the world of illusion, but his personal life is desperately empty, haunted by the past.
He confesses that he is still consumed by thoughts of Kate, and his new attempts at connection, they fail spectacularly. They become physical manifestations of his emotional failure.
Yeah, when he's flirting with a PA from a client, he suffers temporary impotence and curses Kate for forcing his decision.
He's now emotionally and physically paralyzed. He realized he hadn't just lost Kate, the passion, but he also lost his marriage, the stability, and he feels too numb, too emotionally depleted to grieve either loss fully.
Which brings us right back to Kate's anthropological learner's insight, the triumph of permanence over passion.
Right. Kate ultimately realized that her love with Luke was a thunderclap, explosive and momentary, while her love with Carrie was gradual and logical, inevitable as the path of a glacier.
And the ultimate lesson she learned from her work with relics is that all pain is erased in the passage of time. That intense emotions fade, they leave no trace. What remains are the inanimate relics.
The wedding ring, the house, the mixed CD Luke made.
The physical gold coloring of her son's hair. These are the permanent artifacts of the past.
So we've seen the divergent fates of these characters play out in excruciating detail. The choice to chase mad love resulted in Luke's exile, his impotence, his loneliness. Kate was forced to accept the steady, settled love she initially dismissed as bland.
And conversely, Cressida, who was the recipient of the betrayal, found genuine passion in her independence and her ambition. She embraced a commitment built on shared values and tender care with Paul, rather than a showy golden facade.
The spectacle of the fall is highly dramatic, but it lacks permanence. What endures is the quiet, consistent effort. The foundation of a life, as it turns out, is built not on gravity, but on choice.
It's clear that falling in love is explosive, yes, but ultimately it's the quiet, often mundane acts of loyalty and consistent effort, running a bath, apologizing after a fight, buying popcorn you won't eat, that prove to be the most resilient artifacts of a lasting commitment.
That is the core takeaway the source material forces us to confront. The spectacular crash, it generates great stories, but it's the steady effort that builds the permanent structure that actually houses a life.
So consider this. In a world where passion can feel like an uncontrollable gravitational pull, is the truest test of love not the initial fall, but the willingness to stop running, to accept the comfortable, familiar Vegemite toast and build something stable, even if it lacks the shine of gold.
What part of your own life is governed by a passionate fall, and what part is sustained by a steady decision?
Something worth mulling over until our next deep dive.
Until then, stay curious.